And then let me know if you guys can see my screen all right. Okay, perfect. Okay, so tonight's presentation is what's your FI number? I always like to do, I've got a couple presentations that I like to update from time to time and then redo them when something kind of happens in my life that kind of makes me think again what my own strategy is. And then when I kind of gets me started thinking, I like to share it with you all as well. Um, so recently, this past weekend, we had a family friend of my dad who passed away of cancer, and he was in his young 60s. And to me, that's still a pretty young age for someone to pass. And then it got me thinking as well. All of the main, or a lot of the individuals in my life, whether it's been sports heroes or kind of like actors, actresses that I've been following throughout my life that passed away way before anyone thought they would, or then that they thought they would, or their families thought they would. And then it's just been so many names that I was thinking of. It was Kobe last year. It was Chadwick, helicopter accident and cancer. Jose Fernandez, if you know who that was the extremely talented MLB pitcher who played for the Marlins, 24 years old, who got in a boating accident late at night in Miami one night. Nipsey Hussle was shot outside of his own shop. Heath Ledger passed away shortly after filming The Dark Knight from an overdose. Kimbo Slice, if you guys know who that is, got really famous on YouTube for backyard fighting and then finally got into MMA a little bit, but he died of heart failure at only 42 years old. Bernie Mac was one of my dad's favorite comedians when he was growing up, and I would always watch his stand-ups with my dad when I was younger. And then he passed away at 50 from pneumonia. We had DMX recently. He passed away from a heart attack. Paul Walker passed in a car crash. And then Steve Irwin was another one when I was growing up. That was a big one that I used to watch, and he passed away from a Stingray accident. And it always kind of puts life into perspective when I hear these things, because none of us, there's a great quote from Kobe that I put on the right. The biggest mistake we make in life is thinking that we have time. And it's so true. We see these incidences, whether it's health or accidents, and we never think it's going to be us, or we never think it's going to be someone in our family until it happens to be someone in our family. Or for these individuals, it happened to be them. I'm sure if you asked any of these people, if you had the chance to, like a year before passing, a couple months before passing, if they thought that's how they were going to go out, would they have said yes? They all probably would have said no. It probably, in the end, caught them all by surprise in the situation that they were in. So it's always a reminder that time is fleeting from all of us. It's never guaranteed. The next day is never guaranteed. So this is why it's so important, this conversation that I like to have with people, is understand what is your financial number. And that's the number that you essentially accumulate, whether it's like $500,000, $1 million, $2 million. And it's enough money for you to be able to walk away from working on other people's time and then fully controlling your time again. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today, and then how some of these individuals changed my mindsets over the years as well, how I used to plan my finances to how I do it today. So introduction, I always introduce myself just in case there's any new listeners. My name's Sean Cranston. I go by TheWealthDad on social media and on Discord. So you can find me and message me if you search up TheWealthDad. I'm 28, about to turn 29 at the end of this month. And I started investing pretty much right out of college. My first investment was a $57 contribution into my 401k. But my mindset's changed of recently. I used to be a heavily max out all retirement accounts before funding your taxable brokerage and investments that are kind of short-term and medium-term types of investments. So these individuals passing kind of got me to reroute myself. And in the next slide, I'll explain that a little bit more. But I am a husband, I'm a father. I have one son and a daughter that's due in about 6 weeks now. We have an investment account for him. We're also going to open one for our daughter. I have written a book on index fund investing. It's called Index Fund Investing 101. It teaches you how to build and manage your own index fund portfolio. And my occupation, I didn't go to school for finance. I don't work in finance. I work with data. And essentially what I do is build reports. Why do I say that? Is because I want to remind everybody that you don't need a formal financial education background to be good with your finances. You could be a fireman, you can be a cop, you can be a teacher, you can be a nanny, whatever the case. good, solid financial principles, you can learn whatever your background is. As long as you keep applying the same principles again and again and again, and you stay dedicated, you'll be just fine in the end. I've been just fine. My wife's been fine. We've been doing just fine, and she was a nanny herself, and we're doing just fine to this day. So this is my brokerage account right here. This is what we call our freedom fund. So we've got in total about close to $350,000 invested in the stock market. But 90,000 of it, roughly 90,000 of it, is invested in our taxable brokerage account. And this didn't always used to be this way. We always used to have our money in retirement accounts because we wanted the tax savings. That's just kind of what we heard on all the blogs that we read, any YouTube videos. They were just like, max out your 401k, max out your IRA. And not saying that that isn't good advice. We still max out our IRAs and things like that. But it was really when Kobe and Chadwick passed a year ago that really got me thinking that, man, these guys were in their young 40s, what appeared to be physical primes, and life was just taken from them so soon. So it got me thinking, I'm in a kind of a career that I don't necessarily love. I enjoy. I more enjoy the financial or the finances that it brings my family, what it does for us. And then it got me thinking, I would much prefer to fully control my days as opposed to working 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, or 50 to 60 hours if you consider the commuting that used to be pre-work from home. So we made a dramatic kind of change in our finances recently of funding our taxable brokerage a lot for early retirement. Because now we've got a goal to retire pretty much in our young 40s, mid 40s, and then fully control our time as much as we can. Because like we see almost every day now, life is completely fleeting. So the example I gave in this tweet was, technically, if we liquidated our brokerage account right now of $90,000, we've got 23 months worth of time that we've saved within this brokerage. So that's almost 2 years worth of time that we've bought ourselves by saving and investing in this brokerage account, which really is, it's a lot of time when you think about it. It's growing by the day, but this kind of keeps us motivated in growing this account, seeing how much time it brings back to our family and how much we can control. And this is just kind of another good way to look at your finances in this perspective. Don't necessarily look at it as, accumulating as much money as possible, growing your accounts as big as possible, because there's no end game sight with that. Yes, it's cool to see the amount of money go up, but if you switch the mindset and focus on how much time is invested in that account, it really puts things in perspectives of where you are financially and when you can walk away, and if you're even close to retirement. So that's how we kind of look at our brokerage. We look at it, view it in time. How much time could this bring us back to our family? So what's the plan for today? A lot of questions I hear in the Wealth Squad, as well as questions I get in DMs on social media, and then questions I get from colleagues, friends, and family. And then there's two main parts to this, to understanding how much you need to know to retire off of, when you can finally walk away. And that's the rule of 25 and then the 4% rule. We'll go over both with examples for the rule of 25 to kind of show you how you can do this on your own. And then the last kind of slide will be on withdrawal options, how to then take that money that you've built up. Like one of the examples I just gave in my brokerage is, if a withdrawal option was I liquefied the whole thing, turned it to cash, and just lived off that 90 grand of cash, it would let us live for essentially 2 years. So that's just one withdrawal option, and we'll talk about a couple others as well. So frequently asked questions. You may have even asked this question to someone, whether it's in the Wealth Squad or kind of at work or whatever the case. But how much do I need to retire from my 9 to 5? That's the basic question that we all want to know. How much do we need? Is it $1 million, $2 million, $3 million? How much is it? Then some people are saying, I'm investing so-and-so dollars, maybe $300, $400, $200 a month in my IRA. Is this enough? Do I need to go more? Do I need to do less? Some people talk in percentages. I'm investing 10% into my work-sponsored retirement plan. Do I need to increase these contributions? Should I max it out? Should I pull back? And then there's some people who are asking for dividends. How big of a portfolio do I need to live off just dividends? If you don't want to withdraw from your principal, sell shares, how much is that portfolio needed to just live off of dividends? We can give an example of that as well. Can I retire off $1 million? Is $1 million really the magic money mark? in all honesty, many people actually can live off of way less than a million for a long time. It's kind of just an arbitrary number in the grand scheme of things. And then some people ask, do I need to be a multimillionaire to retire? So all honestly are great questions, but the underlying question to all of it and the concern for everyone who asks these types of questions is they don't know really how to get to their financial independence number. They don't know what that number is and they don't know how to calculate it. So let's figure out how exactly we can calculate that for ourselves. Or wait, well, yes. So the answer, if you actually ask this question to anybody, the answer is they can't give it to you because once again, it is very specific to your situation. And you kind of have to learn how to calculate this on your own and then kind of walk through it. So now let's kind of walk through how you would calculate it. So part one, the rule of 25. This is the very first number that you've got to focus on for your financial independence number. And the rule essentially says you need to save up 25 times your annual expenses to be able to retire. So how do you calculate 25 times your annual expenses? So on the right, I kind of just give a couple examples of typical expenses in an individual or family's monthly budget. So mortgage, if you own a home, your rent payment, if you're renting like an apartment or something, all of your insurances, health insurance, car insurance, whatever insurance that you kind of add, you put that in there. Your groceries, how many times you eat out at restaurants, if you have any car payments, or if you set travel budgets, all of these you would include in your monthly expenses. So once you would gather all of those numbers, you would then add them together and you'll get essentially a total at the end. Once you get the total of what those monthly expenses are, you're then going to multiply that number by 12, and that's going to give you your total annual expenses. Then let's do an actual scenario. So now that this will all make sense a little bit so we can calculate it. This is my own family's budget. Pretty much there's a couple little small things here and there, but I just threw that in miscellaneous. So on the right, you're going to see our main line items. So our mortgage is $1,489 a month. For groceries and eating out, we're at about $1,500. For subscription services, this is your Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu. Any of those we kind of lumped into one, and it's about $100 a month. Car insurance, $180. We actually have a pretty cheap deal on car insurance. Verizon, we're at $210 a month for phone and internet. And then I always leave the miscellaneous section because we generally spend a couple hundred more on just things that happen throughout the month. So that gives us a total monthly expense of $3,829. So if you go to the left on step one, to get our total annual expense, we took that $3,829 that we totaled up from our monthly expenses and then multiplied it by 12, which is the months in a year. And that gets us a total annual expense of roughly $46,000. Now, once again, this is the rule of 25. We got to get to 25 times that amount for annual expenses. So then your next calculation is you're going to take that $45,948 that we calculated for our annual expense and then multiply that by 25. And that gets us roughly about $1.2 million that my family has to save up to be able to retire, to not be able to work again. So that's a basic example on how you can calculate the first part in your financial independence number, the rule of 25, how to get 25 times your annual expenses. And here's another example because you have to keep this in mind as well. So this is our expected future expenses. So a lot of people, when they do their planning, they base their expenses off of, I'll go back to this previous slide, what their expenses are today. So me as a late 20s father, this is what we spend roughly right now in a working world. But to the next slide, our future expenses, when we retire, we plan to have our mortgage paid off. And then a couple other little monthly expenses here and there will decrease over that time. So you actually need to know what your future expenses are going to be at retirement to get that actual real number of what you're going to need. So in our situation, I removed the mortgage because that'll be paid off, but I added health insurance. So that I just kind of ballparked that as $1,000 a month. But that was a $500 decrease from the mortgage and rent from the previous one. So it went from $1,489 to $1,000 for this new line item. Groceries, $1,500. I kept the same. Subscriptions, $100. Car insurance, it went down to $100 because we'll probably just use one car. And I left the other expenses the same. So we went from 3,829 monthly expenses to now 3,260 expenses. So same equation. You're going to take that 3,260, multiply it by 12, and that gives us about $40,000 a year. So actually, in our retirement years, we're going to need far less than what we need in our working years. So we actually only need about $980,000 to retire. So this was the first step, the rule of 25, how to find 25 times your annual expenses. This is your base number that you're going to work off of when you're eventually going to withdraw money from it. So quick demo, I'm going to show you an investment calculator real quick, just so you can kind of know how to play around with this and how to know, how much you need to retire or how much you need to increase contributions, decrease. But I'm going to use the numbers based off of my brokerage account. So this is my favorite investment calculator online. So if you Google investment calculator, Dave Ramsey, he's got a great plug and play kind of calculator where you can input your specifics and then it'll calculate how much you'll have later on. So for me, I'm just going to say I'm 29, want to retire at 45. We currently have $90,000 in our brokerage. And currently for me and my wife, we put in $5,000 a month. Some people will say that's a lot of money. Some people will say that's not a lot of money. I'm just showing you what we do currently right now as a family. And I use 8% just kind of as a normal average return for the S&P 500. Although the S&P 500 has averaged about 10% annually, I use 8% just to be a little bit more conservative. So on our current pace right now, we actually blow our numbers or our financial independence number out of the ballpark, where I was showing you where we needed like 980,000 to 1.2 million. We're at close to 2.3 million by 45. So then you can say, all right, maybe wanted to retire at 40. How much will we be at? 1.269. So kind of that ballpark of what we needed for the first scenario. So theoretically on our pace, we are on pace to retire at 40. Well, let's just say though that one of us lost our jobs though, and we can only contribute half of that. So 2,500. Now we're getting kind of underneath our goal, but this is just how you would use a investment calculator to plug and play your information. And then you can adjust it how you need to get you to understand where you're at and how much you need to put in towards your goals. Maximize this. So part 2 now. The Trinity study, the 4% rule. Once you have, the number of your 25 times annual expenses, now you need to know how much can I take from that money every year. So if you retired with $1 million, well, you're not going to withdraw 200 grand of that every year because you're probably going to run out in 5-6 years. It's not smart. So you need to know how much can you withdraw without ever running out of money. So what is the 4% rule? What's the Trinity study? Essentially, a couple of professors at Trinity University did a study on various portfolio allocations. On this heat map on the left, you'll see the various asset allocations: 100% stocks, 75-25 stocks, bonds, 50-50 stocks, bonds, and then heavily weighted towards bonds. And they use the S&P 500 for stocks, and then what's called intermediate term government bonds, which you can purchase in an index fund. But those were the hypothetical portfolios they used in their study. And they wanted to see over time, if someone withdrew just 4% of that portfolio every year, how long would it last? When I say 4%, if you had $1 million, 4% of that every year would be $40,000. So let's just use that as the hypothetical example. $1 million portfolio, if you withdrew $40,000 of that a year, how long would it last? Well, in this heat map in the very dark green, the studies showed that under 100% of the time, if you actually just used a basic 50-50 stock to bond portfolio, historically, that portfolio survived over 30 years of retirement at 100% guaranteed success rate. This isn't to say that this will completely be a guarantee in the future. This is based on past returns, but it is a good kind of starting point to see how these various asset allocations have done over time and where you kind of need to be. I'm in the 100% stocks arena right now. The most I'll ever probably go to bonds is 25%, but I'm a pretty aggressive investor. So this is the column I always look at. And then even just for 100% stocks, it still survived 94% of the time over a 30-year time period. So 4% rule, once again, this is how much you can withdraw every year, showing you how much that the likelihood that you'll never run out of money. Another caveat to this actually, and what my family personally uses, we actually are going to only withdraw 3% a year. Pretty much all of these scenarios are about 100% if you can just withdraw 3% of the year. Bonds is still a little bit more risky, but if you can get to that 3% mark, you're almost golden based off of the past returns. So let's look at also another important note. So inflation adjusted withdrawals. A lot of people ask, well, what about inflation over time? Doesn't that eat away at the 4%? Or are we going to have to withdraw more every single year? Are we going to run out of money? The good news about the Trinity study and the 4% rule is it does keep in mind for inflation adjusted withdrawals. So here's an example of how this would work. So once again, using the $1 million stock portfolio as the beginning. Sally has $1 million stock portfolio. She's going to use 4%, withdraws $40,000 a year at the start of retirement year number one. Let's assume inflation is growing at 2% a year. Every single year, it's just going to be 2%. So to account for inflation in year two, Sally is going to add 2% to the $40,000. So if you see right here, the math, $40,000 times 2% is $800. So that means in year two, she's going to have to withdraw $40,800. And in year three, it's going to be the same math. You take $40,800 times it by 2%. That means you have to increase it by another $816. So in year three, you have to withdraw $41,616 to keep accounting for inflation. So all of this inflation adjusted withdrawals was within these essentially percentages of never running out of money. So this study does do a good job on assuming inflation as well. So this is kind of the part two of it. This is the very important. How much can you withdraw from it to never run out of money? So what and how to withdraw? To conclude it, how do we actually, so for Sally, how was she taking out $40,000 a year? Was she selling stocks? Was it dividends? What was she doing? So I'm going to show you a demo real quick how you can calculate what your dividends can be off that. But for stocks, index funds, and ETFs, those are your two main ways. You're either going to live off of dividends or you're going to sell shares or a combination of both. So let's show the Morningstar demo real quick. So what I'm looking up right now is VTSAX. That's an index fund that tracks the entire US stock market. A lot of people in this Discord are invested in this fund. It's a major fund that Vanguard offers, but you can also look at it like the S&P 500. So yield right here. On the main, essentially, summary page, it's always going to give you the fund's yield. So let's just say Sally was invested 100% of that $1 million is in VTSAX. Its current yield is about 1.4%. Not a lot, but when you're remembering the 4% rule, that means essentially 1.4% of that 4%, she can just be collecting via dividends, which means she has to sell, or that allows her then to sell a little less of her shares, meaning she would have to sell about 2.6% a year, as opposed to having to sell 4%. So the dividends are a nice way to supplement having to sell shares as well. If you're invested in like REITs that have higher yields, like 3 to 4%, or in individual stocks that even yield that. I know a lot of people are in AT&T, they've got a high yield. If you've got a large enough portfolio, a couple $1 million, and your yield's about 4 to 5%, then you can theoretically, for your 4% rule, live off just the dividends. You don't even have to sell shares. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway is infamous. You'll see when they get their collecting their dividends, from their companies now, it's like hundreds of millions of dollars a quarter that they're collecting in dividends. So you can theoretically very much live off of your dividends if your portfolio is large enough. But that's just a way to see what your yield is, and let you do the math on how much of that accounts for your 4% every year in withdrawals. And then other types of income in retirement. So even though that you have $1 million portfolio, and you're withdrawing $40,000 a year for the 4%, there's other types of income that can supplement that if you want to, or if you're invested in it, or if you have that from a previous job. So some of these are real estate and rental income. If you're bringing in $12,000 a year in rental income, that's 12,000 less you have to withdraw from your portfolio to live off of. If you have a pension, Social Security collecting, same way. And also a lot of people in early retirement just get part-time jobs. I actually have a neighbor who retired early in my parents' old community. He was in his late 40s, and he essentially just worked at a golf course all day, working on greens. It was like 10 to 20 hours a week, but he used that just kind of as a supplemental income with his stock portfolio. So he didn't have to withdraw as much or collect or take out as many dividends to live off of. So there's definitely different ways to take from your money. There's ways to supplement it. You just kind of got to be smart with your situation. My plan for our brokerage is to live off of as much of dividends as we can without selling the principal. But it's all really just going to depend on what our spending is at that time and how much our portfolio is valued. Because even though we might grow a portfolio of $2.5 million, it sounds good today, but inflation might mean that's a lot less later. But these are, like I said, these are just types of withdrawal options that you can do for your portfolio eventually when you get to the point of retirement, and how to safely withdraw without ever running out of money. So that concludes it. Hopefully I didn't speak too fast. I know this is not as enjoyable of a topic as a lot of kind of investing, how to grow our money, but this is such an important topic because, like I said, we don't want to be in a position where we're working our entire lives and accumulating as much money as possible just to have something crazy happen. I know it's a long shot, but you don't want to be that sad story of 48 years old and passed away before you could even enjoy it, or your family could enjoy it with you. So it's definitely a topic to take seriously and to figure out what your FI number is so you have something to work for. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and feel free to ask me any questions, and I'd love to answer them for you guys. Hopefully you guys could have heard me.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. For the Vanguards that you mentioned, how much do you need to invest in each one? Is it like Robinhood where you can just throw any amount of money at it, or is it a base amount for all the Vanguards that you mentioned?
Yeah, let me try to get out of this screen real quick. Vanguard, they have the most expensive initial investments in the entire kind of brokerage game for their index funds. So most of their funds, the ones I gave an example, VTSAX, their minimum investment, as you'll see on this summary page, is $3,000. So you can always go to Vanguard or Google the ticker symbol and then go to essentially their main page, and they'll tell you the minimum investment. So most of them are 3,000, but the good news, they offer ETFs equivalents. So essentially it's the exact same thing, just as an ETF. And those you can invest in for the cost of the share price. So instead of $3,000 for VTSAX, the cost of this share price is $215. You can buy essentially the same exact investment for $215 as opposed to $3,000. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Hello, I have a question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hello? Yes. Hi. So I have a 403B at work, and I'm trying to decide on which Vanguard should I select in addition to my Roth IRA and the retirement date that they have me in. Should I select a money market funds, a bond, or the index funds? How would I be able to determine which one is the best one I should select?
So I would need to see, always tell people I can give you a lot better help if you just shoot me a DM. I'll ask you a couple questions like how old you are, how much money you have in there, what's your goals, and then I'd need to see the exact funds you have. But I can give you a quick explanation of what each is. A money market fund is essentially just a savings account. You're not going to earn any money on it. It's just like a holding account. A bond fund, they're a little bit more safer investments, but long-term have a much lower return than stocks do. And an index fund is just a collection of investments pooled together in one. There are bond index funds and there's stock index funds. A bond index fund essentially purchases a bunch of bonds. And when you own a bond index fund, you essentially own all of those bonds. Same thing with the stock index fund. If you invested in an S&P 500 index fund, that index fund is going to invest you in the 500 make up the S&P 500. So that's just kind of a little breakdown of each. If you want to talk about the funds in your 403B, I think you said,
Correct.
them, and then we can kind of walk through what your best option could be, or that I would go.
Excellent. Where can I DM you at? You're in the Wealth
So,
Squad?
Yeah. So I believe if
Okay.
you go in the phone app at the search bottom, I think it's in the middle, just search up the Wealth Dad and I should come up and you can shoot me a DM through there.
Okay, will do. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. I'm going to answer this question because this is kind of off topic, but I get this a lot on social media and I never answer it. How long did it take me to become a data analyst? So I didn't go to school for data either. I was a criminal justice major, but I got into data about 3 or 4 years after college, and I took a different route. I ended up doing contract work for an IT company. And I think this is a lot of people's way that they can get into data. I was working for an IT company doing criminal justice work, but a job opening came up to transfer to a business/IT project. So when that came up, I immediately transferred to that business IT project. And then on my own, I just took a bunch of Udemy classes. I know their certifications aren't like official. Companies don't really take them too seriously, but I took every type of like Microsoft Power BI, Tableau, SQL, all of these courses, and pretty much piled up this extensive list of data analytics classes I did. And then I just marketed myself to the business intelligence team like crazy for months, and then eventually got an interview with them and got my shot. So in total, from going to an IT company to doing the certifications, it probably took me about 2 years to finally get into that data analyst role. But like I said, I did it a little differently because I didn't have the formal school background. Okay, I have a question. You said that you invest 5K a month. When you do so, do you allocate how much goes where? Yeah. So let me go up to my brokerage account. This is a good question. So I have 3 funds within my brokerage account: VTSAX, VGT, and VTIAX. It's essentially an international stock fund, a US stock fund, and an IT fund. And this isn't my total portfolio. This is just a small piece, but we have a very deep or a very strict asset allocation. It's pretty much 70% US stocks, 20% international, and 10% we allocate to VGT. So every time we do purchases, depending on where our allocation is that month, if it's a little out of balance, we'll purchase more of the losers to essentially rebalance us out. But we make sure our purchases are in line to get us to our desired asset allocation. Hopefully that makes sense. If you opt to use your FU account to Bridge's early retirement, would you start to use your standard retirement accounts at 59 and a half years old, or wait until later to tap those? That's a great question. And it really depends on how much money's left in your FU account, to be honest. So if you've got still a couple $100,000 left, hell, if you even got like $80,000 left in your FU account at like 60 years old, I would still use all of that taxable money in the FU account before, like I'm talking about deplete it to zero before you tap your retirement accounts. This just allows your retirement accounts to continue to compound for a couple more years, allowing it, like I said, to build and build and build, so that when you eventually need to tap that money, they've grown a couple extra years. So I would definitely liquidate, burn every dollar you can in the FU account before you get to your retirement accounts. Sorry for the coughing and long delays. I'm still getting over this cold. It's been like a week. It's been annoying. After you open a Vanguard account with 3K, you can put any amount in after that, or is there a minimum? Yeah, so if you purchase VTSAX for $3,000, you can then essentially invest $5, $10, $20, whatever it is after that. Once you're in, you're in. But if you want to invest in like another fund, so if you want to add like an international fund, VTIAX, you have to invest $3,000 into that fund as well before you can invest the smaller amounts after. So each fund you invest in requires that $3,000 initial investment. So if you found like 3 funds you like, it's going to take 3K for each for a 9K total. Hopefully that makes sense. Does the rule of 25 apply to any age? Yes, and it's not really an age thing because remember, once again, the rule of 25 is just determining how much. First, you're calculating, once again, your annual expenses and then timesing that by 25. So really the rule of 25 is just figuring out a baseline number. So it's not about an age. It's literally just a number. Calculate your monthly expenses. Once you get that, times it by 12 to get your annual expenses for the year. And then once you get your total annual expenses, multiply that by 25, and that gives you your 25 times annual expenses. So once again, it's just a financial number. It has nothing to do with age. You can hit that rule, or you can hit your 25 times number by 30, 35, 40. Doesn't matter. I often like to say retirement, what is it? Retirement is not an age, it's a financial number. Don't look at retirement as an age number. Can you write off taxes on contribution to index funds? No. The only way you could do that is if you have a 529 account for your children and you are opening that account in your state. So I live in Virginia. Virginia allows me to deduct $4,000 off our state income taxes per child for the contributions we make to the 529. So if I invested essentially $4,000 into their portfolio for the 529 account, I could write those off, but just basic, like if you're contributing to a brokerage account, no, you can't write that off for taxes. Is there a fee every time you put funds into the index fund like VTSAX? No, there's no, so this is why also, if you're going to use VTSAX, whatever brokerage you're at, I always recommend use their funds. So if you're at Fidelity, use their index funds. If you're at Schwab, use their index funds. If you're at Vanguard, use their index funds. And that's to save on what's called transaction fees. So the one I think I see it with the most is people who have Schwab accounts try to buy Vanguard funds, and they've got like a $45 transaction fee for each purchase you do for buying Vanguard funds within a Schwab account. So the way around that is just buy the brokerage's funds. And all of the brokerages have pretty much the same funds. They all offer S&P 500 index funds, total stock market funds. Just purchase their funds to avoid those transaction fees. Starting out investing, is it better to load up on several stocks? If you're just starting out investing, I definitely recommend just investing in a total stock market index fund to begin with. That essentially is several, quote unquote, several stocks in your question. It'll instantly diversify you through all the major publicly traded stocks in the US. I think VTSAX tracks about 3,500 stocks. And then as you get more comfortable with understanding the stock market, how to research companies, how to kind of analyze financial statements, then I would venture into stocks, but I would definitely start with index funds if you're a beginner. I'm 6 years into investing and I'm still pretty much strictly index funds. I don't do individual stocks. I rebalance my accounts myself. So in my retirement accounts, I generally, actually, I haven't balanced my retirements in a while, in like 2 years. But I think last time I checked, they were kind of in their ranges, so I didn't need to. But my brokerage account, I just essentially keep buying more of my losers. I don't do any sales because that's what hits that capital gains tax. So instead of selling in the brokerage, I just buy more of my losers, and that's how I rebalance. Is there any significance to the rule of 25? So it works in conjunction with the 4% rule. This is the mathematical number that they came up with and that they did research on back then. And it's just kind of like the token number that we use today. Like I said, this is why they use the rule of 25 with the 4% rule. Obviously, the more, so if you essentially would do the rule of 30, if you saved up 30 years of annual expenses, obviously that's going to put you in a better position than 25. There would be the opposite. If you saved up only 20 years of expenses, wouldn't really work as well. But this is just kind of the mathematics that they figured out whenever they did this research. I can actually look into it more to give you the exact kind of math behind it and when they figured this all out, but I'd have to dig a little bit deeper into kind of the formation of the rule of 25. Can you explain rebalancing your brokerage account? So I kind of just talked on this one. So in a brokerage account, you always have to be mindful of taxes because it is a taxable account. So if you do any sales of essentially your winners, things that have made money, you owe capital gains tax on those profits. So a way around that is instead of essentially selling your winners to buy more of your losers, just contribute new money and buy more of your losers. That way you'll get your asset allocation back to where you want it to be without having to worry about capital gains taxes. Do you invest monthly or weekly? I generally try to do it weekly. I think we do it probably bi-weekly. It's just whenever we get new funds, which is normally on a weekly basis. All right, I'll do one more question. If any of you have another question, my throat's about done and I don't have much words left in me. So if you got one more question, I'll answer it. Otherwise, we'll log off for the night. Not quite understanding your question, Tambria, but if you DM me, we can talk a little bit more about that one. No problem. Happy that info worked out. I think this is a very important topic. Like I said, it's not talked about a lot, but it's extremely, extremely important. So I like this question. What is the importance of rebalancing as opposed to just letting those funds ride? So the way I rebalance, I like to let my funds ride. So VGT has been my big winner, the information technology fund. I'm a big proponent in if it's going, let it go. Don't touch it. Let that fund keep going, keep collecting those returns. And essentially for you, rebalancing would just mean your new contribution money is just going to go to the funds that aren't performing as well. So you're not necessarily selling your winner. You're letting it continue to ride. You're not taking away from it. But your rebalancing is just your new contribution money is going to go towards the funds that aren't doing as well. And the importance of this is because sectors and stocks aren't always just going to dominate. I mean, one great example I can use is ARK. So this has been their first, and granted, it's only been one quarter, but this has been their first time that since I've been kind of taking note of them, that they are underperforming the S&P 500 by a decent amount. I think it's by about 10%. The S&P 500 is up like 10% this year, and ARK's down 1%. But in the past 3 to 5 years, ARK's been crushing it. So you've got to understand that in the markets, not everything is always going to go drastically up over time. You have to keep in mind that, markets are ebbs and flows. So let your winners win, but also keep in mind that you have to keep funding those other assets in your allocation, because right when one kind of tide goes out, the other one comes back in. And then when you fund those accounts that aren't doing well, that's going to be essentially their time that they might be shining where the other ones are not. Hopefully that explained it a little well. That was the last question. Thank you guys. Sorry, my voice is completely running out now. I hope you all enjoyed that. I did record it. Hopefully this has encouraged you guys to start thinking about what your financial independence number is, and to really prioritize it. Because like I said, you don't just accumulate money to accumulate money. That's a goal that you can never hit. Make your goal attainable, know how to get there, and then make a plan. So have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.